Hey, welcome back. It's been a little while since I posted anything. It's not for lack of doing some playing. I've actually played more, and I've gotten in a groove of playing games rather than doing any kind of deep analysis and videography of some of the things I've been doing. Just to give a little taste of what my game time has been spent with. I actually broke into, I bought Devil's Cauldron a few weeks back, probably a month ago, and I did not take the shrink wrap off. I was just like kind of drooling over it, and I got it for a decent price, not much more than what the MMP pre-order edition would be, and so I jumped on it, and I'm very glad I did. I pull back here. I played several scenarios, some beginning scenarios, and enjoyed it actually even more than Greatest Day so far, although I did play a couple games of Greatest Day as well, and I've just been really getting in the groove of the GTS system, so quite a bit of time with that. I did a little bit of this is not a great angle of GBOH, and the battles of Alexandria, End of the Great, and also took some time to finish collecting. You can see over here with getting all of the Last Eagles series. I finally got Fallen Eagles for a very nice price on a Facebook group, and then also finished filling out the L'Empereur titles. Vive l'Empereur. Excuse my French. And I intended to do more, at least a beginning playthrough of Austerlitz 1805. I really haven't gotten to that yet. And also a little bit on the Vive l'Empereur series. I'd like to touch on that. But once I got into the playing on some of the other games, it just kind of got into a groove. And it's always, I think with gaming, it's momentum. Once you get started on some things, it's just easy to keep going and not stop when you're enjoying it. But I'd like to touch on something I had no intention of buying. I've looked at it quite a few times, but I thought it might not be something I'm really interested as far as getting into the SCS system, Standard Combat System by MMP and the gamers. And I saw this on eBay. Usually I don't purchase things on eBay, but I saw this on eBay for a pretty decent price, and it was an auction. It was not a buy it now, and I ended up purchasing it for a really nice price. It was definitely worth getting for taking that chance of going to a title that I'd heard mixed things about, as well as mixed things about the SCS system. That's a redundant SCS. Already has system in it. That's like saying a ATM machine. Anyway, this is, I posted something in the Wargames Facebook group as far as a picture, but I actually reoriented this setup. It used to be this way, north-south this way instead of, I have it this way now. I have room on both sides to get to where I need to, because it's too far to reach, obviously, and I have just enough room to squeeze by this little space by my desk. So I guess I jumped at this because I wanted to try something that was a little more epic in scale, and something I could just fit into this space I have for my gaming retreat, so to speak. And this fits. It's also kind of epic in scale without being epic in rule books, because if you're familiar with the SCS, it's like an 8-page rule book. What makes it interesting is the little more detail you get with the game-specific rule book, as you'll find out a little bit later. But I wanted to give you an idea of what this looked like set up, and a little bit of what my first impressions are, and possible strategies. I haven't looked at too many other videos or comments about how to go about playing this particular game. So I guess when I watch videos by gamers, I'm always interested in just seeing someone muddle through and kind of experiencing what they are vicariously in their videos, and sometimes piques my interest, sometimes not, sometimes it's just fun to watch. This is the initial setup, but it's after the airdrops and also after the road march by the para units. And I'll explain a couple things here. I'm doing the historical airdrops. I may regret that when I look at the possibilities and what might be at stake for the allied player, and as far as the requirements for victory conditions, I may end up playing a few turns and then starting over to see what it would look like if I did my own choices as far as the airdrop, because as you'll see in a second, that would make a big difference as far as the initial landings and successes in gaining control of some of the key bridges. This shot you see here, excuse the lighting, still working on getting a little bit better lighting in this room. This is the 101st Airborne. In the historical drop, none of these glider units have come down. You can see the glider drop point right there, as well as one of the regimental drop points. There's actually 2 regimental drop points there, and the glider drop, and then over here is the 3rd regimental drop point. One of the keys in the initial game turns, I think, are going to be obviously the supply, maintaining supply with the airborne divisions, both the US and British, because the supply only comes if they can trace to that glider and divisional troop drop point. So they need to keep that clear as they start to go for some of the bridges that they'll need to open up for the British infantry and armored. Then as you go north, we get to the 82nd drop. You can see right here, there's quite the spread. There's one of the, I should get into right now about road march. Road march entails going as far as you can, as long as you don't go through another unit. You can't do it if you start stacked. You can't do it if you start within 3 hexes of an enemy unit. You can't do it if you're DG. There's also issues with getting to bridges. So it's not like an unlimited way of getting across the map. There are some limitations, but you can travel quite a ways. But the airborne divisions, on the first turn that they drop, they can do road march right away if they start on a road and they're not stacked with any other unit, and they're not within 3 hexes of an enemy unit. So one of the other limitations for that is if they're in a polder hex, which is these blue hatched lines, typical to the Netherlands. If you're in a polder hex after the drop, the airdrop, you can't use road march even if there's a road in that polder hex. So as you can see, the 101st, excuse me for the camera being a little jiggly. Not using my tripod here on this. Two problems with the 101st. First of all, they're landing pretty much in all polder. And second, they're a lot more congested. So a number of them, even if they were in polder, they would be stacked with another unit. The 82nd, on the other hand, has a fairly good spread, nice road net, and they clear terrain where their main drop hexes are. And so with that, you can see that a number of the 82nd Airborne could travel quite a ways in that first road march segment. Now keep in mind, there's going to be a barrage segment by the Allied for any artillery, although I don't think they'll be doing anything with artillery because you need to have a unit. This would be the only one here, because you need to have a unit basically spotting for any long-range artillery, and I don't think there's going to be any. There's an artillery unit over here, if you see, with the yellow, but that's going to be out of range, so there probably is not going to be any artillery firing. But after the barrage segment, they can move their normal movement, so they'll definitely be, 82nd is going to be attacking Nijmegen as soon as they can, and hopefully this die roll for that bridge right there in the center is going to be good for the Allies. The 101st does not have a lot of enemy units to deal with right away, but they can't move that far since they couldn't road march. And then as you go up to the far north in the British Airborne sector, just this here, you can see there's 3 units. I'm going to pull back and go up in. there's 3 units there that were able to use Road March to get close to Nijmegen. So those 2 companies of the British Airborne will be able to reach Nijmegen in this area and gain the bridge, just like Colonel Frost was able to take his battalion. And then was a glider company that could get that far. One of the issues with there's a little bit of a mess here I made. I'll fix this, but as I was looking, I was trying to fix the pilot stacks. I'll have to deal with that. But the problem with this drop zone, and there's both the glider division drop zone and also the first para, which is right there. They have a fairly clear area here. The step losses were because they ended up next to a enemy unit. But it's clear, but the problem is most of them landed too close. They either were stacked or they were too close to the German units, so they could not use Road March. Notice that the 4th Para Brigade is not landing this turn. So as far as I see it, and kind of wrap things up before I get into the game proper, the bridges, I suppose you don't even have to say it with a game like this, especially if you're familiar with the campaign. Bridges are obviously key. That, and then supply for the para divisions until they link up down south with the British armored and infantry. But what I can see happening with this game, and that happens somewhat in Holland 44, which I also have, and that is some of the luck of the draw, the luck of the dice, as far as bridges being intact or not. And as soon as a British unit gets next to, moves next to a bridge, I'll grab this so you can see better. Well, if I zoom out, it'll help. Since it's a little faint to look at those numbers on the top, but that's 4 to 6, so it's a 50-50 chance that that bridge is blown as soon as an allied unit goes next to it. The Arnhem Bridge is a 33% chance. Now supposedly the main British commander, which I should know, in the area, did not want Arnhem Bridge to be blown. So I'm not sure it seems like a big dice roll, 1 in 3 chance that bridge is going to be blown before there could be any possible control over it. And the issue with bridges, engineers can be, they can act as ferries. So you can get units across that river if there's an engineer unit on one side acting as ferry. You could get 4 units across in one turn. But I don't think you can trace supply through a ferry. So you'd have to get if that bridge blows and the whole game ends up being, as far as victory condition, it is predicated on getting a trace supply to a unit in Nijmegen. all the way down to the south. So I could see this ending very quickly, and thinking, oh well, you have no chance to make that happen if it goes very poorly for the Allied in the first few turns. But we'll see. I did discover that you can, if you don't do historical drop zones, or at the very least you don't use the historical order of battle, you could bring in the Polish airborne is available, and even with non-historical drop zones, you could even have first airborne or some of the other airborne drop zones here as well. I could see why you wouldn't want to have the drop zones here close to the forest, because there's going to be a lot more units that are that lose steps because of the forest issue when they drop. You can see this is a clear area north of the river that they ended up using, and they also have this open area here. It'd be interesting to study a little more as far as the limitations of what you could do in placing the drop zones, because I'm not sure, like a place like this, whether that's legal. A big thing about doing non-historical drop zones is the Allied player marks where they're going to be first before the German player places units, and the German placement is defined both kind of specifically and in a loose way, in that units are in areas. For instance, I think those units right here, I don't know, it might be back here, it might be here. I can't remember where the hex is that they mark, but on the OOB and setup, you have to be within 4 or 5 hexes of something here, and I put them as far forward as I could, which seems obvious. So there's a lot of setup like that. You can be like in Nijmegen, those units are not specifically set for those hexes. They're set for within 6 hexes of such and such a spot. So in non-historical drop zones and non-historical OOB, you would write down where the drop zones are, and then the German player would set up their units, and it definitely would make it a little more interesting, especially with someone playing this game. I would suspect that they're very familiar with the battle, and therefore kind of doing self-fulfilling prophecies and following through with the way things kind of fell out in real life. So that's I think all for an intro and into that first part of the parachute drop and our paratrooper drop. I'm trying to think of any other rules that might help you get an idea of how the game's going to play. Stacking is 4 units, 4 combat units, period. If you're not familiar with SCS, the zone of controls are not locking. You can move into a zone of control for 2 extra movement points, and you can keep moving if you have enough movement factors. Excuse me. And then big thing to remember is there's movement, which includes overrun, and you can You have to be overrun capable, which none of these units on board that I see right now are overrun capable. They'll be armored units with the typical oval that the NATO symbology has. And so they could move, overrun. If they win the battle, they move into the hex or farther if there's a big retreat. And then after that, after the movement's all over, you can do any of your combats that you so choose. You do not have to attack all units in zone of control. You could choose to do just these two against this one. So it's not like you have to do the old soak off attacks at 1 to 4 or 1 to 5 or whatever. You can choose your point of attack. And after combat, there is exploitation phase for, again, exploitation capable units, the armored units, and they can move if they're not in a zone of control. Then they can move and attack again. So conceivably, you could attack 3 times with a particular unit per turn, which is an interesting system. I think like that's probably the biggest thing that and the zone of controls, how zone of controls work. It's the biggest thing that pushes the SES system past the really basic old games like Battle of Bulge, Avalon Hill type games, Battle of Bulge and D-Day and whatnot. So I'm interested in seeing how this develops and seeing how many of those bridges I can save. Again, that's only dice rolls, so we'll see. I'll get this part cleaned up and then get through the first turn and hopefully post something interesting that happens. At least we'll focus on the most interesting stuff. So if you've got any comments, I'd be happy to hear if you've had this particular game play under your belt, or thoughts. Again, I haven't looked a lot about tactics or any of that, especially this specific game on the SCS. So we'll look forward to experiencing that as it comes. Hope to see you next time. Take care.